Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are going to begin with various models of resilience that have emerged in the history of resilience. The models of resilience are outcomes of a wealth of research that has been conducted in the field. But before we begin with the models, there are some important terms which you have already gone through in our introductory sessions. Here, we are just going to do a quick review of terms like assets, risk factors, and protective factors. Asset is any measurable attribute in an individual or in his situation which can lead to a positive or favorable outcome on the criterion of interest. Intellectual capabilities of an individual, good temperament, socially stable position are a few examples of asset. The next important term is risk factor. It is just the opposite of what we talked about asset. Any measurable attribute in an individual or in his situation which can lead to a negative or unfavorable outcome can be termed as risk factor. Any traumatic or stressful life event like loss of a parent, divorce of parents, witnessing violence, or any other factor like socioeconomic disadvantage can act as a risk factor in an individual's life. One important point to understand here is that at one time there will only be one risk factor present in an individual's life. This is not true. There can always be a cluster of risk factors which can impact our criterion of interest or the outcome variable. The final term which is important for discussing here is protective factor. Any measurable attribute in an individual or in his situation which can lead to a positive or favorable outcome on the criterion of interest by actually reducing the impact of risk factor can be described as a protective factor. Now, both assets and protective factors have a positive outcome on the outcome variable. The only difference between the two is that protective factors work only under adversity or a risk situation. Close relationships with family, safe neighborhood, positive outlook towards life are some of the examples of positive protective factors. Now, let us begin with resilience models. Resilience models can be broadly classified into three types. The first category is the variable focus models of resilience. These are the models which scrutinize the relationships between attributes of individuals, their immediate surroundings, and their experiences to comprehend what are the factors which can lead to good outcomes whenever risk situation is present. Another category of models is the person-focused model of resilience. These models identify people who are resilient and then they are compared with other groups consisting of people who are doing poorly in the times of adversity or who have not yet been a victim of any adversity or any risk situation they have encountered in their life yet. Person-focused models suggest that individuals are considered as resilient only when they are doing well on many criteria of life and not just in any one manner. The third category is that of the pathway models. These models suggest that resilient pathways are a result of many cumulative influences on the individual. Different individuals can have different life paths. Now, in this session, we are going to begin with variable focus models of resilience. This model can be further classified into three types: additive models, interactive models, and indirect models of resilience. The first model which we are going to begin with is additive model of resilience. It is very important to understand that assets and risks are not codependent when affecting the criterion of interest. Both act independent of each other on how well an individual is doing in his life. They are not at all influenced by each other or depend on each other. As it can be predicted, risk factors have a negative effect on the outcome variable whenever they occur. They decrease the optimal functioning of an individual. For example, a person has faced physical abuse during childhood. This variable will act as a risk factor, as it can have a negative effect on a person's life. But if such a risk factor is absent from a person's life, it will have no effect whatsoever on his life. This stands true for all the risk factors. Similarly, assets have a positive influence on the outcome variable if they are present. They either increase the optimal functioning of an individual or keep them steady in life. For example, a talent of playing cricket will act as asset since it will have a positive influence on an individual's life. But such an asset will not have any negative effect if it is absent from a person's life. This again stands true for all the kinds of assets. Until now, we were talking only about what happens when risk and asset act individually over a person's life. But most of the attributes operate along a continuum of risk and assets. This simply means that there are risks as well as assets influencing the outcome at the same time, but in different directions. The minus sign besides risk signifies that the influence is negative, and so higher the risk level gets, the worse the outcome can get. Similarly, the plus sign besides assets signifies that the influence is positive, and so more the assets or resources, the better the outcome can get. Thus, we can summarize that more assets and less risk will have positive influence on outcome, and conversely, more risk and less assets will have negative effects on the outcome variable. This is what happens in an additive model of resilience. If an individual has more assets in life, it will negate the effects of risks and thus lead to a favorable outcome. But if an individual has more risk factors in life, it will negate the effect of assets and thus lead to an unfavorable outcome. Continuing this by giving an example, let us talk about academic achievement of a child. A child receives immense encouragement from his parents at home and social support from his teachers in school. Both the factors are going to act as assets in his life. But the child is sometimes bullied by his companions in school, which act as risk factor. Both the assets and risk factors can be examined, and whichever component is more will exert influence on academic achievement. In this context, as we can see, assets are more prominent, and thus there will be a positive influence on academic achievement of the child. Conversely, if there was no encouragement from parent, it is going to act as a risk factor along with bullying. So, there will be more risk factors present in an individual lives as compared to the assets, and it will have a negative effect on academic achievement. Any intervention which works on increasing the presence of assets and reducing the number of risk factors is based on additive model of resilience. With this, we are at the end of this session. In the next session, we will begin with the second category of variable focus models, that is the interactive models of resilience. Thank you and have a nice day.